All right, what is up, my friends? Welcome. Complete set review. Lost Caverns of Ixalan. That's what's up. We got blue. We just did white, of course, going over the entire set. Constructed and limited. Every card. Going to the mechanics. Giving out our awards. Doing all those fun things. And I remind you all, though, of course, real fast. Bronze to Mythic. We're drafting. On the 14th, we start our Bronze to Mythic show. Going to be a lot of fun. And we also got our 10 new brews next week on Thursday. 10 new decks full of Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards. They'll be up on YouTube. They'll be on Twitch. All my cool stuff and everything else. Look for those as well. Get into blue here, folks. I want to remind you that real fast, we're on Twitch with the follow button. Watching on YouTube, please take half a second, like the video. Helps a ton. Supports the channel. If you like these set reviews, they're a lot of work. If you want to see more of them, hit the like button on all of them, please. It really helps out a ton. Thanks so much. Let's go with blue. Where are my blue cards at? We got the first among equals. I'm not going to try and say it.
You're saying it
I'm just not going to try. I'm sorry. I have respect for the pronunciation. I'm just not going to try. We got what? Wait, what? We're starting with our best in show, the first card. That's right. First among equals is a 3-mana, 1/5 legendary creature. It's a human advisor. Very simple card. Beginning of each player's end step. If an artifact ETB under your control this turn, look at the top two. One in your hand, one in the graveyard. I think this card is excellent. Excellent. Best in show. Obviously, this card needs to be played in an artifact deck, right? You can't just put this card in any deck. But this card has the ability to drop 1, possibly 2 cards per turn cycle, and then also put cards in your graveyard as well. And that's a big freaking booty.
Oh my god, Becky.
Can't be cut down, which is huge. Blocks almost everything. It also doesn't even draw cards. It just puts them into your hand and you're on Shielder, which is great. And then there's also a little land called Mirrex in this format. And Mirrex is one of the best lands of the entire format. Once you get in the mid game, if you're Mirrexing on their turn, you're drawing cards again also. I think this card's bonkers. Like, make its own archetype good. Awesome card. Map tokens are artifact. Blood tokens are artifacts. The tokens off of the Thorpath Iconoclast are artifacts. Don't forget, Brothers War is still legal. There's still artifacts in that set also. Yeah, this card's pretty gas. I'm not going to lie. I think this card's really powerful. In limited, busto. Just totally busted. But I think Constructive, this card's got a real chance to make a whole new archetype, honestly. There's still Power Stone stuff from Brothers War. A lot of cool things happening. I think this card's great. Putting cards in the graveyard is also great. If it would just draw a card, it'd be good. But the fact that it gets around Shieldred, it gives you card selection, and puts a card in the graveyard, also awesome. I think this card's excellent. Really good card. We're actually going past Sleeper here, just right to Best in Show. In Limited, it's busted. Card's awesome. Love it. Ancestral Reminiscence. They really have a lot of reskins in this set. This is a 4-mana sorcery, draw through, discard 1. This is just Sift, right? What did Sift do to deserve this? I like Sift. Raise your hand, chat, if you like Sift, all right? Sift's obviously a good limited card. It's not as good as it used to be. Limited back in the day when Sift was a card back in like Tempest or whatever was a lot more about smaller creatures and kind of like getting to board stalls and wanting card advantage. Modern day limited's a little more about tempo. So tapping for 4 mana not affect the board is a thing. But it's still a pretty damn good card, honestly. If you're playing a control deck, you're playing a slower deck, a lot of removal spells in it. This is a great way to get like card advantage, obviously. And limited is almost always going to be draw 3 effectively because you're starting a land usually. It sucks a little bit because there was a Rain at Revelation in one of the Modern Horizon sets, which was an instant speed Sift. I think if that card was in standard, it would have a small chance to see play as a constructed card. Probably not, but weird things have happened. But yeah, definitely overall good limited card. It's even a splashable limited card too. But yeah, definitely a cool card. It is a common and cool limited card. Brackish Blunder. 2 for an instant common. Bounce a creature, and if it was tapped, make a map token. This card's pretty mediocre. Bounce spells tend to be pretty poor and limited. They're a kind of card that's really overvalued by less experienced players because you think it's a removal spell, you think you're affecting the board, when in reality, it's just card disadvantage. You bounce a creature, they just cast it again, you're -1 card. This one has the ability to make a map token if a creature was tapped, which honestly isn't even that great because like typically with a bounce spell, you want to use to like break up a double block or something like that, or bounce it end step when they cast it. So like you're not even getting a map that often anyway. And then when you do, a map isn't really worth a card. We're not sure how good maps are just yet, but it's not worth a card. Definitely not. So I think overall this is a mediocre limited filler card. Probably shouldn't make your deck most of the time. Not a very exciting card. Braided Net is next. Flip card. 2 mana for an artifact rare. ETBs with 3 net counters on it. You can tap this and remove a net counter from the net to tap another target non-land permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated for as long as it remains tapped. Noting that it's not going to stay tapped forever. It just tapped for 1 turn. And it also has Craft with Artifact 2. Of course, Craft means that you can take this card, pay the cost, and then craft it with whatever the craft with is out of play or your graveyard. So very, very cheap craft here. Just, card in the graveyard, pay 2, craft it, make it go. So once you've used it up, you can flip it, and you flip it into a Braided Quipu, which is an artifact, pay 4, tap, draw a card for each artifact you control, then put this card into its owner's library 3rd from the top. This is a really good limited card, obviously. This is sort of like a pseudo icy that can draw cards later. That's pretty awesome. Very, very easy to craft with artifact and limited. You'll have some random artifact in your graveyard. 2 mana is not very much either. This is just an icy. If it turns into other stuff, comes back again. This is a great limited card. Really, really good draft card. For constructed, not very exciting. We've got an icy, and then we've got a really weird conditional card draw effect. But yeah, great limited card for sure. Easy first pick. Happy it's a rare for limited. Chart, of course, returns. Our hero returns. 2 mana for a sorcery, draw 2, discard a card if you also attack this turn. Good card for aggro decks, and also a good card for graveyard decks as well. Obviously, still sees play, and occasionally in Phoenix decks and Pioneer or whatever. Saw a huge amount of play in Standard and Phoenix decks. And then if you're just an aggressive deck, you can just pay 2, draw 2 off of this. That's usually not as good. You'd rather just put more stuff in play. But no doubt this is a powerful card, and we'll see play constructed. And then limited, the card's excellent. Most of the time, it'll be just 2 mana draw 2, which is excellent limited too. So reprint. We all know and love this card. Pretty excellent card. Cogwork Wrestler. The freaking 1/2 wrestler. That's a pretty crappy wrestler, right?
Still a piece of garbage.
1 mana for a 1/2 flash. When it ETBs, creature you control gets plus -2, -0 at the end of turn. This is always a pretty good limited card, honestly. This is a very tricky little card that is going to be really, really powerful in the hands of good players. Cheap, not that powerful, but effective. And then you get the ability to kind of trade up in combat. They attack with a 3/3 and a 1/1, and you have a 3/3 in play. Now it's 2 for 1. A lot of value for 1 mana. It's an artifact. It's cheap. It's good for synergy stuff also. Don't want a ton of these. Wouldn't want to take this card super highly and limited, but the card is definitely pretty good. Be aware of this card in limited for sure. If they have a 3/3 and you have a 3/3 and they're playing blue and they attack and do it or whatever, just, be aware, kind of thing. Confounding Riddle. No? No award? Well, no awards here. But the power creep is real, folks. Come on. What is going on here? Who remembers freaking Supreme Will? Supreme Will is a card in Amonkhet. Same cost, same card basically. But Supreme Will just impulse. Didn't put the cards in the graveyard. And it was counters to pay 3, not 4. This is Supremer Will. Supreme Will saw light play in Standard. Mostly in Approach Second Sun decks as a way to kind of dig towards Approach. But this card is just so much better than Supreme Will. So we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library and put 1 in the hand. And then 3 get binned. So that's insane value. Very similar to the card Forbidden Alchemy from, a long time ago, Sun Titan decks or whatever. Which is very, very good. Obviously, if you're getting value off of graveyard, it's excellent. And then it's also a convolute, not a mana leak. It's hard to properly quantify how much better counter target spell unless the controller plays 4 is than pays 3. Think of it like the difference between a 6-drop and a 7-drop, right? How much more mana is a 7-drop and a 6-drop? It's a lot. It's not just 1, Difference between a 1 and 2-drop is much different than the difference between a 6-drop and a 7-drop. So this thing is much closer to just, a counter spell that's also going to give you value. Also, this card's excellent. Really, really good. I think you're going to want to have, something graveyard-esque in your deck to make this card super exciting, but still a really good card on rate. Great limited card. Turns on Descend. We'll get there as well. Yeah, really, really good card. Council of Echoes. We have a 6 mana 4/4 uncommon flyer with Descend. Now, once again, folks, if you're at work right now, take a second. Put your work down, grab a notebook, grab your pen, and look me directly in the eye so I can explain to you what Descend does, because it's friggin' confusing, folks. So, we already saw if you descended in the white cards, right? And descend is like one ability with 1,000 different words and meanings. Descended means like morbid. If a permanent card has hit the graveyard from anywhere, you've descended. But descend is basically like threshold, right? So threshold is an old ability that counts the number of cards in your graveyard. If you have 7 or more, it turns on. Very simple, always 7, pretty simple ability. Descend is more complicated. Descend is only limited to permanent cards in your graveyard. It has a number on it. And then if that number is achieved, this ability is on. So realistically, the words descend 4 don't need to be on this card. There's a signifier what the ability is. But the reality is when this card enters the battlefield, if there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard, return up to 1 target non-land permanent other than this to its owner's hand. So if you have 4 more permanent cards, your descend 4, this card turns on. There are different descend numbers in the set. There's descend 4, descend 8, and so on and so forth. But it only counts permanents, which is important for constructed because as they've seen from Delve and other graveyard mechanics, it's really easy to play a bunch of cantrips and just like fill your graveyard up. And this is trying to kind of get away from that. So we can't just play Thought Scour, Gurmag Angler. If you want to send things, you have to get permanent cards into the graveyard. So if you're on, which shouldn't be that hard to be on in a game unlimited with this card, by turn 6, you have a 4/4 flyer that bounces something. Pretty decent card. I prefer a bigger body here. If it was a 4/5 or a 4/6 or something like that, it'd be a lot better in limited. But I say overall here, you have a pretty good limited card. Nothing super exciting, but solid limited card. And apparently Descend is only 4, 8, and Fathomless. So it's not everywhere. It's only very confusing, not insanely confusing. But yeah, so that's Council of Echoes, not playable constructed, obviously. Deep Root Pilgrimage.
It's a trap!
One of the problems that Wizards is having with the standard sets in the last few years is that it's very, very hard to flesh out a theme without blocks. There are only, one set for the most part in each set, I guess, or in each area and thematically and so on and so forth. So we have a card like Deep Root Pilgrimage here, which is a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever one or more non-token Merfolk control become tapped, make a Merfolk token with hexproof. There just aren't that many Merfolk, and there aren't going to get any more Merfolk because it's just like, this is the Merfolk set, and then there might be Merfolk in later, but maybe, but I think this card's pretty overrated overall. Obviously I'm a Goblin player, so this card's, bad anyway, but 2 mana for enchantment, you tap, they make a 1/1. Note that this is not a limitless effect. Whenever you tap 1 or more non-token Merfolk. So it's not like you tap a 4 Merfolk and get 4 Merfolk. You only get 1. If you had some way to like slowly tap your Merfolk 1 at a time via activated abilities, that would be pretty good. Like the old Lorwyn Merfolk had a lot of tap abilities where you can maybe like tap to do a thing, tap to do a thing, tap to do a thing, tap to do a thing. That'll give you 4 Merfolk. That's pretty powerful. But I think currently in standard and historic and the arena formats, there just aren't a lot of really good ways to utilize this card. Unless you're finding some way to combo it infinitely. Like it's like Kiora's Follower. It's like a blue-green 2-drop, like untaps. And I feel like 2 of those like untap each other or whatever, which is kind of cool. But aside from that, overall, pretty unexciting. And then if you were to convoke off this, so like only get 1 token, 2 mana up front, I think this card's pretty bad, honestly. Unless you're comboing with it, this card's kind of eh. In limited, I think this card's still pretty eh. It can kind of like keep making a token. If you're playing a ton of Merfolk, sure, I guess it's fine. But realistically, this card's pretty bad, honestly. Cool card, but it's whatever. Didact Echo. We have a common here, 5 mana, 3/2. When ETBs draw a card, and then we have Descend 4. If you have 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard, you draw a card when it is flying. So pretty solid limited card. If this card was like a 2/2 for 4, I think it would be a lot better. That being said, it's still a card advantage, creature that will probably have flying later in the game also. So I think this card's reasonable, honestly. I think this card's a fine draft card. You can't afford to take this card very, very highly or play that many of this card, but it's a fine draft card. I'm not sad to have this card in my draft deck, I don't think. If it has flying and draws a card, it's pretty good. Eaten by Piranhas. Chomp.
Much too good for children.
2 mana for enchantment or a flash. Enchant creature. Enchant creature loses all abilities and is a black skeleton creature, base power, toughness 1/1. Now, we've seen this card before, right? This is a pretty common effect of like, Frogify or whatever it might be. Take their thing, make it small. At instant speed, pretty awesome. The important thing to note here is that this is going to matter for Descend and for Descended. It's so weird, the mechanics, like, to say a different mechanic, the same word, same name. But because your opponents don't want to block with this probably, right? So they block with it, they chump block, whatever it is. That's a card going to the graveyard. It counts your descend and then it gets descended. So I think this card will be a little better than it looks based on the context of the format. But this card's pretty good overall, right? They have a 6/6, you curse it. Pretty good overall. You know, just a curse roll to look at basically. But yeah, good draft card. Constructed, no, but Frilled Cave Worm. We got a common. 4 for a 2/5 descend 4. It gets +2/+0 as long as there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard. So, and this thing's on, it's a 4/5 for 4, which is pretty good in blue, but still not like that exciting, right? This is just like a filler level 4 drop. If you're always descending, it's pretty good, but you know, it's a 4 drop, just a big idiot, no flying, no evasion, just an okay card. Really cool art, but mostly just limited filler. Hermetic Nautilus, 2 for a 1/4 vigilance. So actually, pretty good stats for a common, right? I'm sorry, it's an uncommon. Sorry, did it again. I'm actually gonna counter that for my mistakes. Uncommon. So it's an uncommon 1/4 for 2 with vigilance. Pay 2 and you can flip it and make it into a 4/1. This card's pretty good. Pretty good draft card. Not playable constructed, obviously. But in draft, this is like a pretty good blocker. You can attack with it. If they don't block, you flip it. If they do block, whatever. It's got vigilance. Good draft card. It's also an artifact for synergy stuff too. It's cool. Hurl into history. 5 mana for an instant. Counter target artifact or creature spell. Discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Discover. It's our first look at Discover. All right. Buckle up, folks. Once again, get your notepads out. Discover is basically Cascade, but in a lot of ways better. So Discover means that you exile cards top your library until you exile a card, a non-land card, with mana value or less. You may cast it for free or put the card in your hands. The difference between this and Cascade is that Cascade was always locked to the mana value of the card casting it. So you cast a Bloodbraid Elf, you Cascade until you find a card that costs less than it. So it was always basically, you know, just Cascade 3, if you will, or Cascade 2 on, you know, Ardent Play or whatever. Discover is a variable, so you can discover whatever you want. So you're cascading for whatever mana value the card says. In this case, it's X. It might be 3, it might be 10, whatever it might be. You're also have the ability to put the card in your hand and not cast it. So you have the ability to, if you hit a conditional card you don't want to cast, you can just put it in your hand and draw. That's pretty good. And the Discover is also contingent on the resolution of the spell. So in this case, you are casting the spell. Cascade would always just happen. It's a trigger on casting of a spell. Discover happens when the spell actually resolves. So if you were to counter a spell, it would stop the Discover, whereas Cascade isn't like that. But for the most part, this is just Cascade, and Cascade is pretty damn powerful. That being said, this card is not pretty damn powerful. This is a very conditional 5 mana counter spell. And then Discover X. Discover has the interesting clause where the higher of a number is, not the worse it gets, but there's major diminishing returns. You know, in older formats like Modern, you want to have the lowest Cascade cost possible, lowest Discover, you know, number possible, because you want to try and hit the same thing over and over and over again. When the number's large, it's very hard to actually hit the card you want to hit. So discovering big isn't even necessarily good. So that's kind of an issue as well. So I think this card's pretty bad. They're playing it pretty safe here. I think this card could easily just been counter target spell. It didn't need to be only artifacts or creatures, making this card basically unplayable constructed and probably mostly unplayable unlimited. But that's what Discover does, so we get to do that. Inverted Iceberg, 2 mana for an artifact. This is, again, there are a lot of artifacts in this set that are effectively just like spells, instants or sorceries, by making them permanents. They interact with craft, interact with descended, interact with descend, and so on and so forth. So they make more sense in that regard. This is a 2 mana artifact that ETBs. You mill a card, then draw a card, which is obviously just, you know, not great, but okay. Then it has Craft with Artifact 6. So you can spend 6 mana at sorcery speed to exile this card, and then any artifact either you control or from your graveyard, and it'll flip. And it flips into the Iceberg Titan, which is a 6/6. Whenever it attacks, you may tap or untap target artifact or creature. That's really good. Holy shit. That's a really good card. This is a common? Wow. That's really, really impressive. Okay, sure. So yeah, I mean, 2 mana cantrip, play it early, and then later on you spend 6 mana, and you have to exile it and then return it. So it will have something like this, but it's a pretty good 6/6. That's a pretty good card. Honestly, that's a good card. Yeah. Wow. I thought it was uncommon when I read it the first time. Card's good though. So good draft card, obviously. Constructed, no. But yeah. It's card good. Cool. Sack fodder, yep, sure. Up next is Kitesail Larcenist. We have a 3-mana human pirate 2/3 flying ward 1. It's a rare. Whenever it ETBs for each player, choose up to one target artifact or creature that player controls. For as long as Kitesail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts with tax. Sacrifice this artifact at 1 mana of any color and lose all other abilities. So basically what this card does is it ETBs and removes all the abilities from a card, either an artifact or a creature, and makes it a treasure. So if it's a 3/3 with some ability, it's still a 3/3, but now it can sack for a treasure. If it's an artifact, it's going to be mostly worthless to turn into a treasure. So this is much better against artifacts than creatures, although it is not useless against creatures. If you target a Shieldred, they'll have a 4/5 in play with no abilities. So they still have the 4/5, which is pretty big deal. So not that useful against creatures, but against artifacts, pretty good. That being said, like, it's just a random 2/3 flyer. You know, like, it's like, all right, sure, I guess. And like, it's the thing becomes the treasure until this thing leaves. Yeah, I think this card's just like, sorry, is it not? Hold on, Judge. Is it not a creature anymore? My bad. For as long as this remains in the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts. Yeah, it doesn't lose the other types that it is. It just becomes a treasure also. But it would say in addition to the types. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong here. I apologize. There's like 9 lines of text on this card. Any judges in chat? We can clarify here. Becomes. Okay, I apologize. I misread the card. So this card actually does remove creatures from play until it dies. That's actually pretty good. All right, so this card can make Shield into a treasure. That's not a creature anymore. That's pretty damn good, actually. So I obviously misread this card initially. I thought I just made it in addition to. So that being said, this card's pretty good. It's almost like a blue Ravenous Chupacabra. It's obviously a 2/3 flyer for 3. So you can cut down it, you can kill it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's a pretty good card. It's a blue Banisher Priest. All right, you got me. I apologize. Misread the card. Definitely seems good though. Seems like a very good card. Obviously, a great limited card, and then pretty solid constructed card also. Not sure what deck wants this card, but a blue Brutal Cathar is pretty nice. So yeah, I'm impressed. I was wrong. Card's pretty good. Limited, great. Constructed, probably also pretty great too. Moving on to Lodestone Needle. It's meant for an artifact with flash when it ETBs. Tap a creature or artifact and stun it twice. So once again, we have a spell-based artifact here. Craft with artifact, 3 mana, and turns into the Guidestone Compass, which is a artifact. 1 mana, tap, creature you control explores, only as a sorcery. This is an uncommon. This is a very good limited card. Like, being able to explore repeatedly is pretty good. It's cheap, not that hard to craft, and then being able to explore over and over again. Don't forget, exploring is also like scrying. If you are unfamiliar with exploring, it's a recurring mechanic. You target a creature, look top card of your library. If it's a land, put it in your hand. Otherwise, you can either bin it or put it on top and put a counter on creatures. So, pretty cool. Yeah, pretty limited card. Obviously, 2 mana for a stun effect isn't great, but as long as you can reliably craft it, this card seems reasonable. I would want 4 of this card in my deck, but as far as like having a mana sink later in the game, the card seems like an okay limited card. Malcolm in the Middle. Alluring Scoundrel. Wake up, Malcolm. Time to go to school. You're not the boss of me now. This card's pretty sweet. Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel is a 2 mana rare legendary Siren Pirate. It is a 2/1 flying flash, which is pretty good, honestly. You know, 2 mana 2/1 flash flyer is very reasonable stats. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a chorus counter on it. Draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 4 or more chorus counters on Malcolm, you may cast a discarded card without paying its mana cost. So it's basically just a 2/1 flyer, but it's going to loot, right? 2/1 flash flyer, sneaky, end step it, untap, attack. It gets a loot. The looting turns on descend. It also triggers, or descended, and then it also helps to trigger your descend cards. Also puts cards in the graveyard, pretty sweet. You know, if you hit the point where you get 4 counters and you're actually like discarding and casting cards for free, that's pretty cool. But reality is, it's just 2-1 flyer, it just loots, honestly. I think this card's just pretty good. A lot better than it looks. It's also a pirate, which might matter also. There are also good blue-red pirate cards, which we'll get to as well. Cool card, for sure. Definitely cool little sleeper card here. It's a lot better than it looks. Looks kind of like a silly, simple card, but like, card's pretty good. You know, I think the chorus counter stuff's a little bit of a red herring. There's just 2-1 flash fire if it loots, which is pretty awesome. And I like it. Great limited card also. That's sleeper for blue. Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel. Very, very high floor. Marauding Brine Fang. This is the land cycler for blue at common. Every color has 1 land cycler. It's a 7 mana 6/7 with ward 3 and island cycling 2. Land cyclers, of course, that cost 2. Much worse than one land cycler for 1. But still a fine card, obviously. This is a pretty good defensive card. It's got ward 3. All in all, this is not as good as the white one. 7 is a lot more than 6. And ward 3 doesn't matter that much in a 7 drop, because like they'll probably be able to pay for it. But it's a land cycler. It's certainly a reasonable card. Not very exciting, but it's fine. Merfolk Cave Diver. We have a uncommon 2/4 for 3 Merfolk Scout. Whatever creature you control explores, it gets plus almost on a turn and can't be blocked. It's a fine limited card. There's plenty of explore, blue-red. I mean, blue-green. 2/4 body for 3 is fine. Occasionally unblockable, fine. Just like a fine limited card. Oaken Siren. It's meant for a artifact creature Siren Pirate. This is a 1/2 flying vigilance. This is a common for 2 mana. Tap to add a blue. This mana will only cast an artifact spell activating ability of an artifact source. It's a pretty good card, actually. A 1/2 flying vigilance for 2 is like, you know, it's not the best ever, but it's reasonable. And there are a lot of artifacts in this set, surprisingly, especially in blue and white and red. So this card's pretty good. Obviously, you want to have a lot of artifacts to use this card properly. But if you're like in taps for mana like 2 or 3 times, it's pretty good. Honestly, blue mana dork. Kind of a weird one, right? Constructed, no, but definitely a really, really cool card. Not even trying. Deepest, I can't say that word either. I can't say anything, jeez.
You're saying it wrong.
The Blue God, 4 mana for a 4/3 flyer, which is pretty reasonable stats. Whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains Rebound. We're doing Rebound now too, I guess, which means you exile it resolves, and the next upkeep may pay it again for free. So you get to double spell, basically. Whenever it dies, turn to the battlefield tapped and transform under owner's control with 3 time counters on. So this is one of the many gods. There's 1 god for each color. When they die, they come back as a land. And the land's going to be Temple of Cyclical Time, which is taps for a blue, and you remove a time counter from it. And you pay 3 and tap transform it, but only if it has no time counters on it and only as a sorcery. So once again, it's important to know that these god creatures they're not unkillable, but they will come back eventually. This one will take a little while, but honestly, a little bit better than like, you know, the white one requires a certain number of attackers or whatever. It's kind of hard to do. This will just like happen eventually. You know, conditions be damned. Basically, it just takes a little while, then it comes back, which is pretty great. This card's pretty good, honestly. You get a decent sized body. You know, constructed wise, this card's not good enough. It's a 4/3 flyer for 4 with like must cast spells to do stuff isn't really good enough. This is a great limited card. Really, really good limited card. Bad news, of course, for the gods are there's tons of exiling removal in the format. So like between Sunfall and everything else, it's pretty easy to remove these things. Hence why the Kamigawa dragons aren't very exciting, but great limited card, pretty cool art. You know. The Puzzle Door. What's that? I'm sorry. What's behind the Puzzle Door? Your Bombin Common, that's what. Blue for an artifact. Pay 1, tap, sack. Local top 2 cards of your library, 1 in your hand, 1 in your graveyard. This is effectively a 2 mana sleight of hand, right? However, this is going to be one of your super synergy cards. This is a card that can trigger Descended. This is a permanent for Descend. It's cheap. It puts an extra card in your graveyard for Descend also. It's card selection. Super easy to get in there. It's an artifact for random artifact stuff also. This is like the card that puts everything together in your draft deck. If you're playing Descend stuff, artifact stuff, kind of just does everything in all the archetypes for a very, very cheap cost and almost good enough on rate. You can craft it. This card does a lot of great stuff. Love it, love it, love it. Very similar in a lot of ways to Birthday Escape from the Lord of the Rings set, where it's like just this card that draws a card, but does everything you want to do in the set. Birthday Escape was one of the best, if not the best, blue commons in that set, despite being 1 blue draw card. So I think this card's excellent. Constructed, outside shot. It's just cheap enough that maybe you can see playing Constructed. But for limited, this card's phenomenal. That's your Bombin Common for blue. The Puzzle Door. Out of Air. That's horrifying. 4 mana for an instant. Counter target spell. It costs 2 less to cast. Targets a creature. An interesting take on the Remove Soul variant. So effectively this is blue counter a creature or blue 2 counter a spell. That being said, not very exciting. I think at blue it's pretty tough. You know, limited wise, blue is kind of tough also. And that's where Remove Soul's at its best. Remove Soul is a playable card in Constructed. I have played Nullify before in my control decks. So it's all like out of the question for this card to be playable. And it's also like, you know, you can just cancel later on also. But yeah, overall, not the most exciting card. You know, I think if it was able to cast for, if it cost like a 1 and a blue less, which is a strictly better Remove Soul, we'd be talking. But overall, Pirate Hat. Arr, pirates. Jennifer and equipment. It's a common. Plus +1 to your creature. Whenever it attacks, draw and discard. Equip Pirate for 1 or equip for 2. These kind of cards tend to not be particularly great. If your deck's full of pirates, this card's like, it's okay, I guess, but still not that exciting. It does, you know, loot, so it can, you know, filter out lands and so on and so forth. If your deck's super piratey, this card seems okay, but for the most part, it's just a mad limited card you probably don't want in your deck. Relic's Roar, 1 blue for an instant. Till end of turn, target artifact or creature becomes a dinosaur with 4/3. Yeah, a 4/3 dinosaur creature. So 1 blue is cheap. Usually these cards are like cost 2 or 3. So that's really cheap. So this can make your random artifact spell that's just rotting on the battlefield into a 4/3 to block, which is kind of cool. Or your map tokens. And it is really cheap. That being said, still not particularly exciting. You know, like this is like a weird sort of like deal 4 to an attacker card that might also lose your map or whatever in combat too. For the most part, I'd say this card's probably pretty unplayable, but it's cheap. It's interesting to see this kind of effect so cheap. River Herald Scout, 2 mana for a 1/2 EDB Explorer. Playable draft common, not the most exciting. You know, 2/1. As a 2/1, this card was a staple in Constructed, but as a 1/2, it's just not very exciting. So, good draft card though. Sage of Days, 2 mana for a 3/2. Whenever ETBs, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put one of those cards back on top, put the rest in your graveyard. This is a good draft enabler for your Descend decks. You can just play it in mill 3. If it's a card you really want, leave it on top. 3/2 for 3 is, you know, your bread and butter limited card. Just good draft card for your Descend decks. Nothing more. Self-Reflection. I like it.
Waka waka.
6 mana for a sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. So, honestly, not a very good card. But it does flashback for 4. So it's almost like the Roar the Worm effect, where you get like you want to just discard this and play it for its flashback cost rather than ever play it for its frontside cost. You can only copy your own things too. So most part, this card's pretty bad, but it's a cute card. Cute limited card. You never want to discard it, just play it for its flashback cost. It's so weird seeing these like one of mechanics in these sets, like 1 flashback card, 1 battle cry card. But yeah, definitely not a very exciting card at all. As an instant, maybe, but yeah, pretty big waste of some pretty cool art and name. Shipwreck Sentry. We have a 2 mana for a 3/3 defender. As long as an artifact enters the battlefield under your control of this turn, it can attack. This card's pretty good. The old 3/3 for 2 blocker is like a limited staple these days. It just like blocks really well. And if you're playing a deck full of artifacts or whatever, this is like just a house. It's a beater. It's a pirate also, which is kind of cool. Definitely a draft card that needs some help, but could be a very good draft card for your deck. This is the kind of one you want to get later in a draft and have it be really good in your deck, not take early, but pretty cool. Cineas Bentasaur. 6 mana for a uncommon 4/4 dinosaur. When it ETBs, look at the top X cards of your library, X the number of caves you control. I haven't gotten to caves yet. Plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard. Put 2 of those cards in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So as long as you have 2 or more caves in play, this is a 4/4 Moldrifter for 6. That is very good and limited. What's a cave? I haven't gotten to caves yet. There are a bunch of lands in the set that have the cave subtype. Uncommons, commons, and rares. We'll get to those in a little bit. Suffice to say, there are a decent amount of them. And there's a land slot in the draft boosters that will 70% of the time be one of these cave cards, and then 30% of the time be a basic land. So there'll be a lot of caves going around. This is going to be a pretty good payoff for you. I'd imagine this is more of a green card. You want to splash than an actual blue card, because it seems like the green cards care about caves the most, but this card's pretty damn good. Just 4/4 for 6, EDB draw 2. That's awesome. The Song of Stupefaction. 10 for an enchantment, aura, enchant creature or vehicle, EDB mill 2, and then it has Fathomless Descent. So once again, folks, take out your notebooks, put down your work, put down whatever you're working on. Let's talk about Descend even more. The most complicated mechanic in the history of Magic the Gathering is basically just 3 different mechanics of the same name. So we have Descend and a number, which is threshold for permanent cards in your graveyard. It's usually going to be 4 or 8. All right. Then we have Descended. We saw on some white cards where it's basically a morbid trigger for permanent cards that go to the graveyard, and then it turns on if a permanent card goes to the graveyard. And then lastly, we have Fathomless Descent, which is an enchanted which is basically it counts the number of permanent cards in your graveyard rather than having a static value. So again, I'm not really sure why these all share the same mechanic name, because they're all fairly unique mechanics that just use the graveyard. They're all cool mechanics, but very, very odd for 3 pretty different mechanics to share the same name. Whatever. So Fathomless Descent is count the cards. Enchanted permanent gets -X -O, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So this is a lot of words to say a card you've seen before, where it's just an enchantment that gives minus the power. Good defensive card. Good if you're trying to mill yourself also. If you're trying to self-mill for Descend. And definitely the kind of card, though, you're going to want if you're like winning with flyers or some other way, because you're going to make some big blockers for your opponent. Yeah. Nothing too crazy here overall. Spyglass Siren. No awards, but this card's awesome. 1 flyer for 1. It's a pirate and a siren. And then when EDBs make a map token, this is an uncommon. This card's great. 3-Bit Inspector, Boldaran Epicure, and now you have Spyglass Siren. We're trying to complete the super cycle of 1 mana cards that create an artifact of some kind. And the map token's great because you can just map onto the Siren and possibly have a 2/2 flyer, which is great, or draw a card. This card's excellent. This card's just play constructed, great limited card. Even just by itself, this is effectively just a 2 mana for a 2/2 flyer with haste, or 2 mana for a 1/1 flyer that will draw land, which is both really, really good. So great. This is an uncommon. It's not a common. I know you can't tell because the symbols are bad, but this is an uncommon, but still a really, really good card. We'll definitely see play. Like it a lot. It's great. There's no black or green one yet. I don't think Gilded Goose counts because it's a rare. Staunch Crewmate. 2 mana for a 2/1 human pirate uncommon. EDBs looks top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact or power card among them, put it into your hand. Rest go to the bottom. So very, very powerful card if you can hit every time, right? 2/1 draw card for 2 is excellent with good types. That being said, it's a little weird for artifacts. It's a non-artifact enabler for your artifacts. So you get run of a spot of like, you play too many of these, you can't let them play enough artifacts, yada, yada, yada. It was a pirate deck. This card seems great if they're not playing too many spells. So the kind of card where it needs to have a home, but if it does, it'll be very, very good. And limited, same idea. You have enough artifacts or pirates in your deck. 4 is not a lot. 4 can definitely miss if you're not playing enough artifacts or pirates. But when it hits, very, very good. Good card. Subterranean Schooner. A schooner is a ship. Pirate ship. God damn it. Rolling and Brood, you pull it together. So for a 3/4 vehicle. Whenever it attacks, target creature that crews it this turn explores crew 1. This card's really good. Wow. I kind of didn't realize how cheap this card was when I read it the first time. 2 mana for a 3/4 vehicle with crew 1, and it explores the creature that crewed it. This card's really good. Wow. I didn't read these blue cards well enough. Too many words in the set. We finally got a good vehicle again. Obviously, I haven't seen a good vehicle in a really, really long time. They're very, very hard to balance. This card's excellent. Crew 1 is phenomenal. 3/4 is a good size. Does play well with the Merfolk enchantment. I don't know if that's going to make it good enough or not. But this card's good. This card's really good. I like this card a lot. Not legendary. This card's excellent. Obviously phenomenal and limited. and then we'll probably see play in Constructed. It does crew target creature, not all creatures that crew it, so you can't overcrew it. But yeah, card's super sweet. Like it a lot. Card's great. The Enigma Jewel. All right. We're about to get into the craft rabbit hole. 1 mana for a legendary artifact. EDB's tapped. It's a mythic. Taps for 2 colorless. Says mana only to activate abilities. Sorry. Not Soul Ring. And this has craft with 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities for 9 mana. It can pay for itself, to be fair. So it's basically just 7 mana. But, so that means, so far every craft we've seen has been craft with artifact. So I have an artifact in the graveyard or in play. I can take this card, craft with it, yada, yada, yada. This one is really weird because it crafts with 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities. So, Ginger Brute or, whatever, Treasure Map, yada, yada, yada. So that's a lot. Obviously, you need to have 4 specific kinds of cards in play or in your graveyard to craft with. Have a bunch of mana also. That's a lot. But when you craft it, you get the Locus of Enlightenment, which is a legendary artifact that says this has each activated ability of the exiled cards used to craft it. You may activate each of those abilities only once each turn. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, copy it. You may choose new targets of the copy. So this card's like, you thought I get the Soul Calder was complicated? This card's insanely complicated because you've got 4 ability cards under this. It says all the abilities of all 4 cards, and you can copy them. I don't know what to say about this card, honestly. What excites me about this card is the Omen Hawker part. It's just like a Soul Ring for abilities, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could do some ridiculous combos with this card with the right activated abilities. That being said, you figure it out. Yeah, honestly, you figure it. I'm not gonna figure this one out. And then in limited, probably not. I'm just gonna move on. We're gonna move on to the next card. The Everflowing Well. 3 mana for a rare legendary artifact. When it ETBs, mill 2, draw 2. So divination with upside is pretty good, right? And it's also, you can Yori in it and flicker it and so on and so forth. And then it has Descend 8. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, transform us. 8 is a lot, to be fair. 8 is a lot. Flip it over and we get the Myriad Pools, which is a land that taps for blue. Whenever you cast a permanent spell by using mana produced by the Myriad Pools, up to 1 target other permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn. So if I cast a creature, something else I have in play can become a copy of the card I'm casting, which is very weird, right? Because what do we do with that? So I play some creature and the thing I have in play becomes that creature I can attack with it, I guess. But really, really weird card, honestly. Yeah, last two weirdos back to back here. The thing that excites me is just permanent 3 mana divination, draw 2, mill 2 is pretty good, honestly. So I don't know if the Descend part even matters really. Although it's funny, it's not a May, you have to do it. But yeah, I don't know. We're just gonna move on. Tishana's Tidebender. We have a 3 mana 3/2 flash. When it ETBs, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as this card's on the battlefield. So, pretty interesting Stifle here. We got Stifle and a Merfolk. So for older formats, obviously you get Stifle, fetch lands and stuff. But this card's pretty cool in that it's kind of similar to the other blue card, Banisher Priest style, where you get to stifle an ability, and then as long as this thing's in play, that ability can't be used. That's pretty powerful, right? So you can stifle a Yawgmoth, and now they just can't use it anymore until this thing goes away, which is kind of sweet. Lock down the One Ring. Pretty good. So I think this card's a lot better in older formats where there are a lot of really powerful cards like that going on. That being said, it's still just a 3/2. And I don't know exactly what I would want this card in that respect. This is random 3/2 Merfolk. What card is itching for this card? Oh, counters triggered abilities too. Holy crap. So when it enters the battlefield, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact creature or planeswalker creature that loses all ability. Oh wow. So actually, I'm sorry. It's not just Stifle. It counters the abilities on the triggered ability. I guess Stifle counters those too. But folks, There are a lot of words in these cards. I'm doing my best, all right? I'm sorry. So this, if you counter the Shieldred ability, then the Shieldred loses the ability completely. But obviously you can just kill it. And it's still a 4/5. I don't know. I think this card's probably a little overrated. Folks are going crazy about it in chat right now. It's a very weird card. It's a very finicky card. And it's not like Banisher Priesting stuff. Because you can just kill it and it's still in play. So, like, you hit their Shielder with this, it's still a 4/5, you know? Yeah. Overall, I don't know. And then, if you were to hit an Atraxa with this, it would lose all of its keywords. Yes, that's pretty good. So, decent answer to Atraxa, but, like, obviously Blue already has good answers to Atraxa, too. Man, weird card. Yeah. Probably a pretty powerful card, pretty weird one. Probably pretty good limited. I'm not sure. This is a card we got to see this card in action. This card's really weird. Definitely potential for sure. Woo. Oh boy. Unlucky drop. 4 mana for an instant. Target creature artifact on top and bottom. We've seen this card 1,000 times. This is your generic mediocre removal spell in limited. As it is. Waterlog Hulk. 1 blue for an artifact uncommon. Tap to mill a card. And then you can craft with Island by paying 4. And you get exile an island from player graveyard. And you get Watertight Gondola, which is a 4/4 vigilance vehicle. If Descend 8 is active, it cannot be blocked, and it is crew 1. I think if you're specifically like a Descend deck, this card's pretty good limited. I don't think that you can play this card unless you're getting a lot of value off of your mills. It doesn't really do enough until it goes on. And then it's also like, you need to crew it too. But yeah, it's like a finicky whatever limited card. Waterwind Scouts, 3 mana for 2/2 flying, ED make a map token. Card seems great. Just like, you know, almost a 3/3 flyer or draw the cards. Good, very, very good draft common. Probably like one of the better draft commons in a set. We got Waylaying Pirates, 4 mana for a 3/3. When it ETBs, if you control an artifact, tap creature opponent controls, then stun it. So this is kind of like your Bergstrider effect. Sounds pretty good. Good draft card, honestly. If you're playing out of artifacts just to be on all the time, this card's quite good. Decent size, taps things. Like it. Good draft card. Zoetic Glyph. We have a 3 mana Aura, enchant artifact. Enchant artifact is a golem with base power and has 5/4. And whenever it goes into the graveyard of the battlefield, discover 3. Kind of a cool card, honestly. We've seen this sort of card before in Brothers War, I think it was. Discover 3 is probably better than drawing a card because you can't draw a land. You can't draw a big card either, but you always get a spell and you always get to cast it for free. This card seems really good. It's uncommon. Card seems great. Sort of like in Soul Artifact with a lot of upside too. Card's sweet. I like this card a lot. Gotta have artifacts for it, but sweet. That's it. Blue is done. Best in Show is First Among Equals. Malcolm is our sleeper card. Deeper Pilgrimage is our trap card, and then our Bombin Common is Puzzle Door. With apologies to Kite Sail Larcenist, because I did not read it properly. That card probably should have gotten some sort of an award, but that's blue. So, YouTube folks, love you, like, comment, subscribe. Black's coming up. Let's go.